Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Kent Crayford. I'm the co-chief petitioner of the Portland Public Water District Initiative. And this is Floyd Jones, my co-chief petitioner. And we are hosting this meeting tonight to talk about the initiative, to offer some additional background. We were here a week or two ago at the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association meeting, and that really wasn't the forum to get deep into this topic, but given this neighborhood's history on all things relative to the Portland Water Bureau, we thought that it would be appropriate to have a longer conversation, and so we're here tonight to do that. Then Floyd and I are going to give you some background on how the initiative came together. We're going to talk about the structure of the proposed water district, its major effects, and then there'll be a time for questions and discussion.
So I'll start with my background involvement in this. Friends of the Reservoirs got involved about 12 years ago when the City of Portland, the Water Bureau, made a line item decision to demolish and bury reservoirs up at Mount Tabor Park. And at that same time, the city was also in negotiations, discussions related to relinquishing Portland's sole ownership of our Bull Run system to other governments, so that we would lose control. Our control would be diminished to 1/13 control. And concurrent with that, the city was also holding a Bull Run treatment panel led by a consultant who's now been on retainer with the Water Bureau for 20 years. And they were discussing building a very costly membrane filtration plant at Powell Butte, which would allow for blending our pure Bull Run water with waters either from the Willamette or the Columbia River. So we got involved initially related to the reservoirs, but over the last 12 years we've been involved in every issue related to our water system. We've been working to protect our Grand Bull Run open reservoir system and ratepayer pocketbooks. So there have been many issues along the way. I was a member of the Water Bureau Budget Committee for 3 or 4 years. I've attended all Water Bureau budget meetings for the last 8 or 9 years. I attend water manager meetings with wholesale customers in Gresham, Portland, and Tigard. So that's a brief introduction.
Yeah.
I'll let you give your
Sure.
background.
My name again is Kent Crayford, and I've been involved in this issue for 11 years, about the same amount of time as Floyd. I started in 2002 when the Water Bureau announced that it would like to build a membrane filtration plant up at Bull Run. That was going to cost about $300 million, and it was going to raise our rates 76%. And I thought it was really unnecessary for what is probably one of the most pristine water sources, municipal water sources in the world. I organized a group of large water customers at that time to weigh in against this, and we were successful in getting Mayor Katz to shelve the project at that time. And that's when we got into LT2 and we started working against the plan to bury the reservoirs. We got very involved in a variety of issues, both in town and up in Bull Run. We helped try to get logging roads decommissioned up in the Bull Run. I served on the Water Bureau's Budget Committee as well. I served on the BS Budget Committee also. And over the 10 or 11 years working on these issues, became increasingly convinced that the deck is kind of stacked against ratepayers. I've served on budget committees with some of the folks in this room. I think that's where I recognize Daryl. And I think there's some good work that's done there. The problem is the City Hall chooses who serves on those committees, and ratepayers are very underrepresented. Fast forward to just this past year, we had an opportunity, a very unique opportunity, kind of one last chance to save the open reservoirs in Mount Tabor and Washington Park. We had a new mayor come in who said that he was willing to go to bat for us with the Oregon Health Authority. Floyd and I met with him shortly after he was sworn in. We asked him for a few things. We asked for new leadership of the Water Bureau. We asked for them to curb their capital improvement budget. And we asked for him to personally weigh in with the governor's office to get a reprieve for Portland's open reservoirs, just like New York City was able to do. He said, okay. And 3 months later, we got a letter from the Oregon Health Authority saying that they were denying Portland's request for a reprieve. And when I asked the mayor's chief of staff whether he'd ever talked to the governor, she said she didn't know. And in my experience in politics, that means no. He never spoke with him. So, you know, the problem that we've seen here over the last 11 years is not that we have a lack of opportunity, but that we have a lack of leadership. And we had a golden opportunity, and our mayor didn't take it. He didn't even bother to ask the question. And that's when we decided that, you know, our system is broken. It's a governance that's the problem. It's not a problem with the folks who work at these bureaus. The problem is with the leadership. And Portland's commission form of government lends itself to bad leadership because we have one person who runs these utilities. We now have one person running both utilities, 1,100 employees, $500 million budget, and there's very little interest from the other commissioners to ask questions, hold them accountable, and so that's what's led to a lot of these problems. So, so that kind of leads us to, I guess, you know, where we are today, and that is fixing the governance model.
And I'll just add that, you know, during our meeting with Mayor Hales, we offered very specific recommendations for, you know, cuts to the budget. We met with his staff, and most of those recommendations were ignored. And the current commissioner, Nick Fish, has refused to meet with Friends of the Reservoirs, even though we've been really the most consistent Water Bureau watchdog for 12 years. We made 3 or 4 requests. And that's what we've seen over 12 years as we elect, you know, a new commissioner, new commissioners, and they're really either disinterested in addressing ratepayer interests, or they're promoting bad things like relinquishing the ownership of our system or building a chemical filtration plant that will allow for blending our water. So,
Sorry,
you know,
can you speak a bit louder? Sorry.
sure. You know, so repeating the same thing year after year, you know, clearly hasn't worked. So that's how we got to this point where it's time for real reform. And
Yeah, and if I could just add, not to get too political, but Mayor Hales did promise to turn things around. He promised to, quote, lower water and sewer rates in his voters pamphlet statement, and then promptly broke that promise once in office. We came to him, you know, a little skeptical, but with an open mind, and he invited us in, and we worked collaboratively, as Floyd said, with his staff and identified areas for savings. We had, you know, talked about LT2 and these other issues, but nothing changed. And so that's what, you know, convinced us that we really need to do something big, or just accept that nothing's going to ever change. And that's what led us to this. So maybe now's a good kind of time to transition into discussion about the water district itself. This is not a new concept. The Northwest especially has a long history with PUDs. This initiative, this PUD was modeled after Eugene's Water and Electric Board. EWEB is
When you say initials, can you say what they
Oh, I'm
stand
sorry.
for? I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of initials
Sorry.
have gone by and,
Sorry, so the Eugene Water and Electric Board is often known as EWEB. And it is actually a sub-agency of the city of Eugene. So it's not an independent utility district. It's not its own entity. It's simply a sub entity of the city itself. And that's what the Portland Public Water District would be. It would be a new board, but all of the assets of our system, the Bull Run watershed, our distribution system for water, our sewer and stormwater system, they would all remain the property of us, the city of Portland residents. If you read anything else to the contrary, it's not true, and I encourage you to read the initiative, research the Eugene Water and Electric Board, and you can get a better idea of how that's structured.
And you might add that we worked with Greg Chamoff, who was the former Oregon Legislature's counsel. So he was the attorney that helped us write this, and he's written many of Oregon's laws. So it's very well written. You hear that criticism that it's not well written, but it is very well written. He paid attention to all of the details. So the district will remain a part of the city. The main thing that changes is the governance. Instead of city council, a commissioner or czar in charge making the decisions, you'll have a board of 7, and it'll represent the entire city, even though the initiative says that it will be based on the Portland Public School Districts. That's only if that's legal and feasible. And it wouldn't be legal to exclude East County, so the boundaries would have to be moved out. And Portland's legislative body, the city council, after the May election, will work with the with PSU rather, to finalize those boundaries, but it will be inclusive. It will include the entire city of Portland, and they'll be equally divided. Each district will be equally divided. So no longer would city council.
When did the questions start? I mean, I think it's.
Well,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
thought we'd
well,
just go
let's,
through the
let's,
structure
let's
and
just,
then
yeah,
we'll
why
do
don't,
the
if
Q&A.
you'd allow us, Paul, to just finish up here, and then we can open it up to questions. I think, just to move through the rest of the major, points of the initiative. First of all, it's important to know that this is a volunteer board. These folks are not paid. They are elected by district. Each district will be of equal population. As Floyd mentioned, the city council is required to work with PSU to ensure that the districts are built equally. Let's talk about kind of what it does. First of all, the initiative prohibits spending water and sewer money on non-mission critical items. The language in the charter is strengthened to ensure that water and sewer funds cannot be spent on projects that have little or nothing to do with the water and sewer system. Currently, as many of you know, we have an independent lawsuit working its way through Multnomah County Circuit Court that raises questions about spending of water and sewer funds on things that have little or nothing to do with the water and sewer system. Those expenditures by the city's own accounting now total $127 million.
Give us an example.
The best example is on the front page of today's Portland Tribune, where, and this is a new number, the last I heard it was $40 million. The city's now spent $52 million in sewer rate money on lawyers and consultants and other professional services, mostly studies and other things related to the Portland Harbor Superfund. Now, all potentially responsible parties in the Portland Harbor Superfund, lawyer up and they get their consultants and they spend their money. The problem here, though, is that the liability for the pollution doesn't necessarily reside with Portland sewer ratepayers. And that was the big revelation in the paper today. After 10 years, the city is acknowledging that it's probably not the responsibility of sewer ratepayers to pick up the tab for this. And yet sewer ratepayers, all of us, have spent $52 million. So the good news is we might get reimbursed. The bad news is this was a very inappropriate use of those funds. They've essentially used you as a credit card and borrowed that money. Well, sewer ratepayers aren't a bank. And so, you know, again, this is one of the things that we're trying to solve here. Just gross abuse of what are restricted funds under the city charter.
And another example that you've probably heard of is the Rose Festival building remodel, $1.6 million. They did a land trade here, taking out Tabor money, which was Water Bureau property, and traded it for the building downtown, the McCall building, and then brought over Bureau of Development Service workers to the Water Bureau to work on projects that have nothing to do with water service. I mean, there's plenty of work that needs to be done, you know, at the Water Bureau, but remodeling the Rose Festival building isn't one of them. When they did that, they raised your rates 1%. But in light of this lawsuit, City Council returned money to the Water Bureau, but it didn't go back to ratepayers. So there are a lot of issues with spending money that's not related to the service.
So let's finish up with the major effects of the initiative, and then we can take questions and start discussion. The initiative requires that an independent financial audit be conducted annually. That's currently not done. As I said earlier, these are a $500 million utility combined with no audit. It's alarming because, as we see, money is moved around. You're all probably well aware of the scandal earlier this year where it was discovered, or last year, it was discovered that the city's top administrator was moving restricted water and sewer funds around. These are the kinds of things that an audit would prevent. So we need an audit. We opted to exclude the district from the auditor, city auditor's oversight. And that was purposeful because of the experience that the city auditor has had. We have a great auditor now. She's done a great job of revealing some recent abuses. Unfortunately, though, the previous auditor was responsible for many of those abuses, using water and sewer funds to fund politicians' election campaigns, which was wrong. So again, you know, the purpose of an audit, a deep financial audit, is to follow the money. Even with a great auditor we have now, it's not a financial audit. We have a political audit, more or less. We really need financial audits. Next, just want to walk through some of the other major effects, and these are very important. This is a huge opportunity, we believe, to make permanent some things that are currently only temporary with respect to the Bull Run watershed. The city has in its books and its code protections for the Bull Run watershed, but those could be changed with 3/5 vote of the city council. What the initiative does is enshrines the current Bull Run protections in the city code in the charter itself.
You know, that would prohibit entry into the watershed and prohibit logging in the watershed. It also prohibits water and prohibits the system from being privatized, and that's been a real concern of Bull Run activists. I mean, for, you know, the last 20 years, we've had a revolving door consultant on retainer receiving contract after contract after contract, and one of those same corporations, you know, 10 years ago held a workshop on the west side of town on privatizing water systems. And over the last 12 years, we've seen debt amass. So we just want to make sure that those provisions are in the city charter, and Bull Run will remain a public entity. We've also prohibited regionalizing our water system. It should remain Portland's system. and we prohibit commingling Portland's water with inferior sources such as the Willamette River. So even if somehow they proceed with building a chemical filtration plant, we're not going to be bringing in Willamette River water, mixing it with our Bull Run water. We've also included strict conflict of interest provisions. On budget committees, we see folks who have contracts with the city serving, there's the conflicts of interest with this revolving door consultant who, thanks to Water Bureau employees serving on selection committees, gets every single contract, decade after decade.
No, I think all I'll say is, this is a reform initiative. It's controversial because when you've got so much money at stake, you have very powerful interests, and you have folks who benefit from the $127 million spent on things that have little or nothing to do with the water and sewer system. You have folks, who have come out of the woodwork opposing this. We expected that. It's our objective isn't to be popular. Our objective is to affect change, and we're hoping to do that. So we'd like your support. We'd like to answer any questions anybody might have. So go ahead.
Yeah, how would the relationship between the board and the current leadership within the Water Bureau, not the commissioner, but David and et cetera, down the line, how would that work?
Mark, would everybody stand up and ask their questions? I mean, I feel like there's a private conversation over here. I'm not deaf, but it's like a whisper.
If you guys want to move into
No,
the...
you raise your voice, pretend we're the
No,
judge.
there's carpet and ceiling in this room, and it inhibits voices traveling. So,
Yeah,
please
okay.
stand
How
up.
the future relationship between the elected board, the new one, and the current leadership, like the director of the Water Bureau would work, and who oversees who's going to be in charge, and how is that change made if there's going to be one?
Well, we expect, given all of the problems with the current crony administration, I mean, David Schaff is a political appointee by Randy Leonard. Ty Kovach was Randy Leonard's chief of staff. When Randy Leonard left, he brought over 5 employees. We expect that the new board is going to do a national search and hire new leadership at
So
the
they'll
Water Bureau.
select them. I was wondering about the mechanism for change.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
new
that would
board,
be up to
the
the
new board
board.
will oversee the administrators of both BES and the Water Bureau. So they take the place of the city council in overseeing the management. But, your question raised a good point. What happens, to the bureaus? And this speaks to some of the questions I think a lot of the Water Bureau employees have. Everything moves over. In a way, it's not that the bureaus move over, it's that the governance moves over. The bureaus kind of stay right where they are. It's the city council that steps aside, and the new board steps in above it. So all of the contracts stay in place, all of the employment agreements, none of that changes. The measure really, that wasn't the intent, that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to change what happens down here. The point was to change who's making these decisions up here. So that was the idea.
Yeah, the last meeting we had here, where you spoke briefly, there were several groups that were opposed strongly to the measure. I believe the Audubon Society was one. Is there anyone here that are in opposition to this measure that's going to speak today?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to hear from them at a certain point, I guess.
Yeah. If I could speak to the opponents, and some of you got this.
Right.
So Floyd and I, we've been doing this 11 years. Everybody knows our number. They know where to find us. Of the folks on this list, we have only met with one group before they announced their opposition to the measure. We solicited meetings with many of these groups and either never got a call back or got turned down. So
soliciting support?
we were soliciting a meeting. But the point is that, you know, it's not about the measure. It's about defending the status quo. So we can talk more about that, but I just want to preface that before we have the representatives of these groups speaking. So
Sure.
with that introduction, Ted, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kent, for that introduction. And I just have a question. I'm not going to try to present an opposition, as you said. We're not having debate tonight. So, one of my questions is how your measure restricts who Portlanders can vote for this new board, and that in this board will represent all Portlanders on all water issues. Some of the restrictions would limit people who have like a lot of experience, who've served on budget committees and whatnot, as you described. How will limiting the choice that we can make as Portlanders to who will represent us on this board serve our democracy better and make that board more accountable? Well, isn't it really up to the voters to make that decision? Why are you trying to kind of limit our choice at the outset, if you will?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to
Well,
speak
you
to
can
that?
start and then I'll jump in.
So we have very strong conflict of interest provisions in the measure, and that was purposeful, and mostly because of what Floyd and I have seen firsthand from serving on these budget committees, watching contracts come through the two utilities. What you have now is you have people who serve on the budget committee, they review the budget, there's line items in there for spending, they approve that budget, which includes money for their own organization, and then the next day they get cut a check. That's very wrong. I mean, that's a clear conflict of interest. It's not serving we, the public, or the ratepayers well. It's self-dealing, and that's bad government. It's bad utility management. So we sought to correct that in this by, having a waiting period. And one thing that's misunderstood about the conflict of interest provisions, it's not a prohibition against those people serving on the board. It's a cooling off period. Some people are required 72 months cooling off periods. Some people are required 36 months, depending on whether they were a contractor or whether they were a city hall staffer. But the point is, just like in Congress, you have a cooling off period before a member of Congress can leave and then go back and lobby his colleagues. We have a cooling off period here. And yes, it may restrict, someone said it might restrict 20,000 people from serving on the water board. Well, there's 500,000 Portlanders. So, if we have to restrict, 5%, so be it. But that's what we need to do to end the conflicts of interest and the cronyism that's been rampant in these two utilities.
Yeah, and those of us who've spent literally hundreds of hours digging into documents that the Water Bureau didn't want us to see, looking at these global engineering firms, I mean, all you have to do is look at council agenda every Friday afternoon and see CH2M Hill, CH2M Hill, MWH Global. I mean, they are the most powerful folks at these water bureaus. And that was part of the intent, was to not have these folks, overseeing the Water Bureau and having contracts continue to be distributed to them. And then on the budget committees, I mean, right now, who is the Water Bureau? I was on the budget committee for 3 or 4 years. I didn't ask to not be on the budget committee anymore, but I'm not a head nodder. I don't sit there and cheerlead, massive increases that are an equity issue for the average ratepayer. So I wasn't invited back. But as Mark Gibson, who's also on the budget committee with the Water Bureau, knows, I go to these meetings every year, as I have for the last 8 years. And who is on the Water Bureau Budget Committee? Well, there's a woman whose only income, according to her resume, since she's moved to Portland, has been relying on a good relationship with the Water Bureau. There's another person who doesn't show up for any of the meetings, but his organization receives $60,000 every year for lead paint removal. And there's another woman whose relative worked for the Water Bureau. So what kind of independence is there? That was one of the reasons why we put such strict conflict of interest provisions. Joe?
One of the,
One of the questions that was asked to me in the last couple of days is that the employees that are under the current system, most people see them as city employees. Is that correct? They are actually city employees in the Bureau of the Department of Water. If you do this and it passes, do they hold on to their position and all of their benefits, and are they still city employees? And how do you do that when you move? Is that a legal problem?
Well, it's still, this district is a part of the city, so all the contracts will come over.
So they won't lose any benefits? All right, that's the answer I
When
gave.
their
I
contract
wanted to
comes up
double check
again, it'll be
that, because I was nervous on
renegotiated.
that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when their contract comes up again, it'll be renegotiated. I think some of them are in negotiations now, or maybe they finished, but.
No, they're back.
Who would they negotiate with?
The
If this passed.
the administrator, still the management. It's the only people who get a new boss are the administrators. Everything else, the structure stays the same. These are still City of Portland employees. Their employment contracts are still in place. They're still valid. All of the vendor contracts are still in place and continue forward. The only thing that changes is the governance at the top.
Is there a guarantee for that long term? I mean, or do you, in a couple of years, decide, well, okay, that's not working so good, and then you can change that?
Well, it can't change because this is still within the City of Portland. This is a change, the measure is a change to the City of Portland charter. So, again, it's not setting up a new entity. This isn't a public utility district in the traditional sense. This is a City of Portland district. All that changes is the governance. So
I'm also concerned about just one more thing too. Some of your big backers, Perry Merlot, Spencer Lumber, Walker Siltronics, and they're in Beaverton. Why are you taking their money? They don't have, I mean, Walker is in Beaverton, correct, right? And how much are they?
No, Siltronic is on the Willamette River in downtown, near
Yeah,
the Fremont Bridge.
Siltronic is a Portland company. They have been the largest water and sewer customer in the city. So they have a tremendous, their process of, they make silicon wafers, which is
Sure, but that seems still like a special interest thing if you're taking a lot of money from them.
they're ratepayers, and we're thankful for their support. They pay the same rates as all of us.
Well, they pay high, my understanding is they pay higher rates, which subsidize residential rates.
No, everyone, the rates are the same for.
And they
Unless-
did state, for the record, that if it continued, that they would move out of Portland. Do you know how many jobs that would lose in the Portland area? Do any of you people know? I mean, there's 3 companies that said if the water rates keep going up, we're leaving. I mean, do you realize what that would do to the city of Portland?
10 years ago, I mean, we were so alarmed by all of this that Friends of the Reservoirs actually put out initiatives like this. One would limit the sale of our infrastructure without a vote of the people. The other would create a water board. I can't remember what the third one is right now. But unless you have people supporting you, I mean, individual ratepayers, yeah, we can all contribute $50. You don't get things on the ballot. You have to have someone supporting you. This affects everyone, from the poor, to businesses. We're all customers. We're all ratepayers. I mean, the real problem is on the other side, you have the recipients of our dollar fighting customers. Portland Bottling, apartment owners, they all pay high water bills. They pay the same high water bills that you and I pay.
Well, I also think it begs just the argument too, that when you look at your water bill, well, it says the water bill on it, it is 1/3 water and 2/3 sewer.
Yeah.
And it all kind of gets jumbled together, so I think that gets lost in all of this. And I think it bears saying again, the water bill is not simply a water bill, but in fact a 2-part bill. And if you look at it and look at how the blocks are set up and how the rates are done, while we do have a high water sewer bill, I don't think that the water bills are that high compared to anybody else.
Yes, they are.
People know the difference between their
Well,
water and
if I can speak to that, just to
Yeah, so just to
You're wealthy,
speak to
that's
some of the facts. So, first of all, the